So it's really hard to tell exactly how many organizations have a valid SMS. Mm-hmm. And some operators today still think that if they have a frat, they have an SMS, which is not true. SMS encompasses so much more than a frat. It's hazard reporting, it's internal audits, both on your SMS and auditing your operation. It's change management. It's having a safety committee. It's having a manual for both SMS and ERP. There's so many parts. It's having a safety culture built.
Yeah.
It's having data analytics. We're actually moving into the next chapter of SMS, which is getting into predictive data and having the data tell us where our next incident and accident is occurring or potentially occurring at.
Hello, and welcome to the Business Aviation Collective podcast, sponsored by LD Aviation. I'm your host, Lindsay, and today we get a chance to talk to Amanda Ferraro. Amanda has been in the aviation industry for many, many years. She's the CEO of Aviation Safety Solutions. She is an international Gulfstream captain. She also is part of the NBAA SMS working group. She's a recipient of the Tony Kearn Professionalism in Aviation Award, which is really cool. And she is a CAM as well as part of Top 40 Under 40. So I know we're going to love hearing all about this. So welcome, Amanda.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I'm excited to be here today with everyone.
You have a really great resume, lots of cool and interesting stuff that I just can't wait to hear about in your background.
Absolutely.
Let's start with, like I do for most people, let's start with, how did you even get into aviation?
I was really fortunate that I had a neighbor that was a Northwest Airlines captain. And when I was 12 years old, my mom and dad bought a piece of property from this gentleman, and he took me on my first flight, and I was hooked. I remember that first flight, Lindsay, like it was yesterday, which is really cool. It was a very special experience. Mm-hmm. And he had his airplane at a private airstrip with homes on the property and hangars, and it was a small strip. But more importantly, I remember he showing me the pre-flight and was getting me involved in touching the propeller. And we taxied out. And when we took off and we lifted off, you could see all the homes along the airstrip. It was so cool. It was a residential airport. And so it was the coolest experience. I honestly remember the flight as if it was yesterday.
That is so cool. And I think straight out of the gate, you're giving an example of how giving back can help our community, our aviation community. I mean, Obviously, he got you into aviation, which is wonderful. Okay, so you started, that was your first flight. Then, and if you're 12, you started thinking about it. And
so he got me involved in the Civil Air Patrol. And with the Civil Air Patrol, I eventually became the cadet commander within about a year of my enrollment. And we started recruiting, and I made an agreement with the wing commander. We didn't have an airplane at the time, but the agreement was if I recruited 50 cadets into our squadron, we'd get a ground teams van so that we would start doing search and rescue missions on the ground. Okay. And if I recruited 100 cadets, he would get me an airplane to start flight training. He was scrounging up an airplane in about 6 months.
Oh, yeah, you were true to your word. You did it.
Yeah.
So cool.
I started flight training with my neighbor in the Civil Air Patrol and led the cadet composite squadron, and just had, my memories of my childhood and flying with my neighbor. I would actually leave high school. My mom and dad supported it. I would leave school. I'm like, yep, gotta go fly airplanes. See you all later.
Oh my gosh. You were probably like, everybody thought you were so cool.
It was pretty fun. I mean, it was different, right? I was the kid in high school that I wasn't the popular kid, but I was the kid that was pretty much left alone because I had some cool things going on between flying and horses. And I had my own deal. So very, very lucky. This gentleman actually paid mostly for my private pilot certificate. So, when you talk about giving back, I was given the right foundation, and I very much believe in giving back to our industry. And it's something that's very important to me, both by mentoring as well as volunteering knowledge back to our industry. I think it's critical.
It is. I almost want to say it's an obligation for any of us who have been in this industry for a long time. You're really doing a disservice to the community by not giving back.
Completely. I have mentored over 200 women into our aviation industry and over 100 men into aviation. And that fills my cup, right? For me, that's the piece that when I look at where I've made my biggest impact, and some people will maybe say it's really my business or it's my team or our production of stuff. But for me personally, that's all that I'm about, is helping build people and having people believe in themselves because they can do it. And even though they may be struggling, either in flight training or getting through dispatcher school or working as a mechanic, it can be very difficult, but if you can break through, you can be very successful. And I think that's part of my story.
Oh, that's so cool. Very inspirational. And I think we're just going to see more and more of how you've been giving back and how you're an inspiration as we talk more about your career. So you got a chance to leave high school, because what kid doesn't want to leave high school classes, and you got to go flying. Oh, I know. I was in a question. For those listening that might not know what the Civil Air Patrol is, could you talk about what that program is about?
The Civil Air Patrol is the auxiliary of the United States Air Force. It's the volunteer portion of the Air Force. And the mission of the Civil Air Patrol is to do search and rescue. So the foundation of CAP is a national program. So no matter where you're at, there's usually a Civil Air Patrol unit close by, but they have a cadet part of that program. So kids that are, I believe it's 12 or 13 years old, can enroll and become a cadet. And I had the opportunities to go to encampment and go to cadet officer school when I was in high school, do flight training. And the opportunities for that are endless. If you can find a squadron that has a flight training program and is active doing search and rescue, it is an incredible opportunity for kids to get into flight training and understanding the military aspects and leadership, physical fitness, and education. I mean, aerospace education. There's so many different paths that you can go down as a cadet in the Civil Air Patrol. So check it out. It's really cool.
Awesome. For those listening, I'm going to put a little link on the bottom to a general website about that, so you guys can see more about it. Okay, great. So you've got your private pilot, you're doing search and rescue, your neighbor's helping you out. Where are you going after that?
Yeah. So I had a really bad accident when I was in Civil Air Patrol on a weekend exercise. And I was 17 years old. I fell 30 feet headfirst off of a ropes course at a military installation. And one of the National Guards that we were with saved my life. As I was falling, he pushed me so that instead of me being completely headfirst hitting the ground, I was at a little bit of an angle, but my arms took the brunt of that fall.
Okay.
And when I fell, I shattered the right side, the whole back side of my right elbow, and then both of my wrists, and then ripped the whole inside of my mouth from my gum line. And so I had a pretty substantial injury.
Yep.
I went to the local hospital, but they really weren't able to help me out. So eventually I ended up at Mayo Clinic, and I had 6 major reconstructive surgeries, both with one of the best elbow surgeons in the world and one of the wrist surgeon and his team. But I had 6 major surgeries with them to recover. So I had to learn how to write again. And I had a 1.5-year long recovery. Most people wouldn't know it. Like, if I don't talk about it, you'd never really know. I've made a pretty remarkable recovery out of all of it. I had to go through a lot of physical therapy, had to wear a machine to have my arm, kind of retrain my arm on movement and learning how to move my arm.
Okay.
So I had a long recovery. However, it didn't stop me from my goal. And what happened after my accident, this is really interesting. I wasn't actually planning on being a pilot in high school. As much as I loved it, I was actually planning on going to school to become an equine veterinarian.
Okay.
And
all right.
I had this passion for horses. I also had this passion for flying, but what really fueled that passion was when I didn't have the opportunity to fly and it was taken away from me during my recovery, I realized how much I missed it.
Sure.
And so once I had the opportunity to go back out and solo, I remember, getting my medical bag, getting with my neighbor, and we went out and soloed. And it was during that solo that I decided that this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life, and how much I missed it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So pretty traumatic event, but kind of changed, not even kind of, it changed the course of your life.
Completely changed the trajectory of my life. I will tell you that many of the things that our industry sees today and me is because of that accident. My safety lens is very different than most safety experts. And it's because I have been on the verge of dying and I know what that recovery looks like. And it's a very, very long road to recover. But coming out of that, you're stronger, you're better, you're more equipped to deal with downfalls and negativity, and you learn to live your life to the fullest. And I think that's pretty consistent with some of the things that I've done in my career, that I look at my life as it can end tomorrow. So no regrets, right? No regrets.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such a great outlook. And while some of us might pick that up along the way, you got a chance to learn that pretty early on. And the rest of your life is obviously an example. You're right. An example of that.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Crazy. So how long did it take you to go back to flying, to recover enough to be able to fly again?
Yeah. I was out of flying for about 8 months.
Okay.
And had to get my medical back. The whole physical therapy process I was at the physical therapist a lot. I couldn't tell you how much. I just know, I think I practically lived there for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I even had a machine that was strapped to me 20 hours a day that moved my arm for a period of time, which was just awful, and had to learn how to write again. I'll never forget it. Coming out of that first surgery at Mayo Clinic, the nurse, my right arm was strung up because of the surgery, and they wanted to make sure all the, it wasn't down for all the draining and fluid retention and stuff. So they had it strung up above. And she had come in and she said, she goes, "Hey, Amanda," she goes, "I'm going to prick your fingers. I want to see if you have any feeling." She goes, "Don't get upset if you don't." She goes, "It doesn't mean that you've lost your feeling in your arm. It just means that your nerves are severely damaged from your accident. And we're hoping that you'll be able to feel this."
Yeah. Okay. That sounds scary.
Right. I mean, losing feeling in your hands is a scary thing, right? Especially when you're 17.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. She pricked my fingers and I couldn't feel it. And so it was like heartbreaking, right? And, as much as you want to say, it's okay, it might come back, when you're 17 years old, that's not really what you want to hear or feel, right?
And had you even thought about that prior to that? Like, had you even thought about that was a possibility? Or was that kind of a new potential that she brought into?
They had told me that I had such severe damage in my arm that there was a possibility that I may have killed off all the nerves in my arm and get this severe amount of damage, potential that I may not be able to have feeling in my arm.
Okay.
But I didn't really want to believe it, right?
Sure.
But miraculously, it did come back as the swelling went down, and I regained that motion and that feeling. And I remember trying to pick up a gallon of milk, something that you never really think about doing, or picking up a pencil and trying to write. And what you know from a brain perspective is you knew how to write, and you're writing, you're familiar with it. But when you pick up the pencil and you can't make the letters right the way that you think that they should have been wrote, or what you're looking for as part of your writing is not there, that's a really sobering moment that you go through. So it just took repetitive time to come out of that accident.
Mhm.
But I didn't let my motivation, I didn't let that stop me. Crazy enough, I was planning on graduating with my brother as a junior, and my accident happened at the beginning of May, and I was getting ready to graduate at the end of May. And I would have been the first kid in our high school to graduate a whole year early. Well, I was told after I had fallen that if I didn't finish my work, which I was taking advanced English classes, I had like multiple English classes to try to cram all my credits in.
Yeah.
That I wasn't going to be able to graduate. And I'm like, oh no, I did not work this entire year to do nothing, to not graduate and have to stick around one more year.
Right.
So my mom helped me get through that. All I remember is laying in bed, and I was so drugged up from just the pain, right? I had immense pain. All I remember is me laying in bed. I'm supposed to be doing this book report, and my mom's on the computer typing, and she's like, what am I supposed, should I type this? So she's typing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
sure. Yep. I'm just agreeing with her. Like, I completely close. So my parents, very wonderful people, and very supportive of my career and getting me to a position that allowed me to move on from that accident.
So cool.
Very
So
nice.
you graduated first to graduate early in your school.
Yes.
That is with an injury.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So from there, I went to our local UW Lacrosse College for just a semester. And then I soloed during that time towards the end of the year. And I decided that at that moment that I was going to go pursue aviation. That's when I decided. I actually came home and told my dad I was gonna switch my career after so many years of wanting to be a equine veterinarian, that I was actually just gonna up and switch my career to aviation. And my dad said, how about you go work at McDonald's for a year and then come back and tell me what you really want to do?
Okay.
So not so supportive of that decision, but honestly,
Okay. I have to say real quick on that one. So you and I have a lot of similarities in our background, I think. So I've got horses, you've got horses, we both like aviation. But my dad was the other way around. So I wanted to go into horses as well. Like I wanted to get into equine studies, and my parents were like, yeah, no, that's not what you're doing. So then I was like, okay, well, I'll do aviation. And they were all about that. But that's really interesting that your dad was the opposite.
that is crazy. Yeah, completely opposite. So we could like swap parents, and I think it'd be great.
Right.
Actually, my mom and dad now, like, of course, they're proud, and
Right.
they're wonderful people. And I understand where he was at the moment. He was like, we've gone all over the place and looked at these colleges for veterinarian, and now all of a sudden you're coming home and you're just telling me you want to go be a pilot. Like, I get it, right? As a parent, I do understand that.
Yeah.
So
I do too. And I recognize why my parents said it as well. But in the moment, I was like, confusing.
So I went to Minnesota State University, Mankato, in their aviation program, and I decided that I was going to get my flight ratings once I got my medical back, soloed with my neighbor, got my private pilot certificate right away. I had soloed before I got my driver's license, but because of my injury and my accident, that kind of hindered my ability to get my private when I was 17. So,
Okay.
I got my private pilot certificate finished up, went to college, did all my flight ratings in 9 months. I actually, and for anyone that's listening that's doing flight training, I actually did my instrument in commercial. So I would actually fly instrument in the morning and then fly commercial in the afternoon. And I was doing dual ratings at once to try to get them done. And then I stayed into that first summer, and I just flew like crazy and got all my flight instructor certificates, my MEI, my II, and my CFI.
Mm-hmm.
So I was flight instructing then going into that next year as a sophomore.
That's great. And I was just talking to somebody too, and she's in her 40s now, and she's talking about going back to go to school to fly. And I think the way you did it is probably a really great way to do it. Just go in, get it all done, and then you're starting to make the money. Because sometimes people will do like, an hour here, an hour there, and just string it out really long. But the faster you can get those certificates, the faster you can start making money with the certificate.
Absolutely. I was that kid that was out at the airport at 6:00 in the morning, flying with the flight instructor that, he was a little bit older at the time. And he was actually a farmer. So he got up early anyways to go feed his animals. So he meet me out to the airport and we just started flying. And we had to pick up airplanes because all the other flight school kids were sleeping until 8, 9 o'clock. But I was able to get my flight ratings and start flight instructing, which is what I wanted to do. The teaching part of it, because I love teaching. And I still do today, actually. It's part of who I am in our company.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. That's awesome.
So from there, we had an internship program at Minnesota State University with Atlantic Coast Airlines out in Washington, D.C. I was chosen to go out there, work. It was a 6-week or an 8-week program where we worked in I think it was actually maybe 8 or 12 weeks. We worked in every major department of the airline. So HR, worked in benefits area, worked in the chief pilot's office, worked up in dispatch, worked up in the tower. Had a complete opportunity to really get a good idea of how the airline ran. And as part of that, we were promised pilot slots. My last week of my internship, they furloughed 500 pilots and sent everybody home.
Oh, no. Okay.
So I was sent home, but I came back home and I had an opportunity to start flight instructing at the local flight school. And was asked to do and be the marketing coordinator for the company because I volunteered. I didn't know anything about marketing, Lindsay, but I was like, I need to make some more money. I'm shying as a flight instructor. And so that helped supplement my income.
And saying yes to an opportunity, which is something I'd like to talk about also. Say yes to those opportunities doesn't mean that you have an extreme background in them or even know anything about how to do it, but just say yes.
That's right. I knew how to use Microsoft Word. I knew how to put pictures on a flyer and I knew how to push print. And it started with that, right? And then reading books on marketing, going to the business to business groups and connecting with people in our area, etc. So I didn't know anything about it, but I did exactly that. I was like, yes, we'll take that on. And I ended up actually the flight instructor having over 35 flight students at once. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
I was managing a crazy amount of flight students because of the marketing. I also, when I built enough flight hours, I was asked to become a charter pilot. So I flew in the 310, in the King Air 200 in the right seat, and the Cessna 421.
Okay.
So I started flying with some of the senior captains, and I then met my first husband, who was just coming out of A&P school.
Okay.
And he had applied at Cessna Aircraft Company. And this would have been about the time when the very first light jets were coming out of the market. So the Mustang aircraft that they were trying to produce. So they had his interview. They had scheduled an interview down in Independence, Kansas. And you're going to love this story. I went down there with him and it was hot. It was like 100 some degrees in the summertime. I was going for the company tour. They had said, if you're going to bring anyone with, they can go on the tour of the factory. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to go with, right? I want to go see the tour of Cessna.
Yep.
So I'm in shorts, t-shirt and flip-flops. And I'm sitting in the waiting room, waiting for him to get done with his interview. And the HR manager comes out and he goes, I just heard you're a pilot. And I was like, yes. And he goes, get in my office. We're going to do an interview. And I was like, oh, no. No. We're not doing it for what, And he's like, well, pilot slot. And I was like, oh, no, you're not interviewing me in shorts, t-shirt, and a flip-flop for a pilot interview at Cessna. There's no way we're doing this. And he's like, I am doing this. And I'm like, no, you're not. And he's like, I am. He's like, get in my office. And I'm like, no, let me go find some black pants and a nice button-down shirt or something a little bit more decent that you would expect as a pilot interview.
Sure. Yep.
He's like, we don't need any of that. He's like, just come in my office, fill the application out. And he's like, I'm going to interview right here. And I'm like, okay, this is bizarre. I got hired at Cessna in my shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops as a pilot. Probably the only person in the company that's ever had that, ever done that.
Yeah.
Or we both
started on the first of everything.
It was, well, yes, I don't know, what badge would we call that, right? Yeah, I got my first professional piloting job in shorts, t-shirt, and a flip-flops,
There's got to be a sticker for that somewhere. Oh, Funny.
So,
Okay, sorry. Okay, so you both started then.
yeah, so we both started in Independence, Kansas, and it was very interesting. I mean, I had really some incredible colleagues and coworkers. They were just putting glass cockpit into the single engine line. So I started in the single engine line, working in the G1000 program, helping clients that were buying those aircraft learn their avionics. I cross-trained into doing customer delivery flights. So that was fun. They come pick their airplanes up and we go out and we test everything and we would go test all the, making sure everything worked and demo the airplane for the client and working with contracts. So that was a really fun experience. From that point, as a side note, I wanted to be a test pilot. I was told no.
Oh,
in so many words. But what happened was it actually allowed me to try to be more qualified. And I applied for a Women in Aviation type rating scholarship through that process. And I'm so glad I did. I won the type rating. I won a Citation 500 series type rating because essentially I was told that to fly single engine test, I needed a jet type rating.
Okay.
That's what I was told. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do that. So I'm gonna go apply for the scholarship. So I won it. And I was like,
I love those gals. Yeah.
Wonderful program.
Yep.
Women in Aviation.
Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. So for anybody listening, by the way, their scholarship program, I'm just going to put a plug in for that.
Yeah.
Their scholarship program is incredible.
And I'm pretty sure it's open right now. I think it closes in maybe even 10 days or something. Like it's going to close soon. Yeah.
And there's a specific way to put those packages together, like verbatim, the way that they have them. And you and I could spend an hour just talking about that. But that program and those scholarships it has helped so many people in our industry get off the ground and get their careers going. It also mine. So I'm in that boat and I love it. So I love promoting them. So that actually fueled me the opportunity. And I don't even know, I probably crazy, but I went and so I won the scholarship and I was like, we were looking back at home for jobs because Kansas was a long ways from Wisconsin and Iowa. And we knew we were going to get ready to start having a family. So there was no help down in Kansas where we were.
Yeah.
So we were looking for positions and jobs back home. And John Deere Global Aviation Services had a pilot position open. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to apply. Like, I don't really have any jet time per se. I have a scholarship, but I'm just going to apply and see if maybe some of my background in glass technologies and working with Cessna would, maybe they need those skills. So I went through the interview process. I was hired. I went to Citation 10 school, Citation Sovereign school, and I did my scholarship, Citation 500 series type rating, all within about 5 months of time.
Oh my gosh. And for those that don't know, so those initial classes are close to a month long each, right? 3 weeks, etc. And so that's intense studying. So out of 5 months, you had 3 of those months probably were on the road.
At least. We also did additional training on the backside of those type ratings at John Deere. So we did international procedures, differences training, etc. So I was gone a lot that first, run with my type ratings, but it was a really great opportunity. And I spent 6.5 years at John Deere and eventually made my way into the Gulfstream G5 and Gulfstream G550, flying all over the world. So at John Deere, we were on every continent except Antarctica. And I've been to Africa, China, Russia, Brazil, all over Europe.
So cool.
India. So had a world of experience in a very first class flight department. And
John Deere is known, is really well known in the industry. And I don't know them on the pilot side so much, but I know on their dispatch side. And I want to say Durrett that was there at one point, and I'm not sure who's there now, but they really run a top-notch dispatch department at least.
Yeah, the flight department itself too is top-notch, Lindsay. And to be able to have company names like Cessna Aircraft Company and John Deere starting your career out really helped position myself, I believe, for excellence. Meaning I knew what good looked like. I knew what, I had wonderful leadership in that flight department at that time. And because of that, it gave me such a great base foundation for doing it right, for both companies. So I was asked to work on helping implement our flight department into ISVAO, which was brand new at the time. So John Deere was one of the first early adopters. I was sent to the NBAA ISVAO course and came back and couldn't even tell you at the time what it even meant.
Okay. Yep.
It was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I just took this course and I still don't understand what we're supposed to be doing and not even really sure, like, I don't even have a direction to go back. So we went back and we created a frat, right? That's what everyone was doing for SMS.
Sure. I remember those. Yep. And they're still used even now in some departments.
They are.
Maybe can you tell us what the frat is so anybody who's listening doesn't know what it is?
Sure. It's a numerical-based type flight risk assessment tool, which pilots will run before they go out and do a flight. There's also maintenance risk assessment before maintenance would undertake a major maintenance project or moving an aircraft. They might run a risk assessment, but it's a scored system that tells you if you reach a X number, you're going to halt the operation, ask the chief pilot. The chief pilot's going to develop mitigations or get involved, or leadership will get involved to provide mitigations to lower the risk. Mm-hmm. So FRATs and we call them MRATs, maintenance risk assessment tools. They are used in some organizations and that's just fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, in some organizations, they work really, really good and they're gaining good data out of them. So that's the good news is they haven't gone away, but they're not the main focus of safety management systems now today, especially from a regulatory perspective around the world.
Okay. All right.
So
good.
We can come back to that. But
great.
So I was at John Deere 6.5 years. I was asked to implement ISVAO, and as part of ISVAO, they have safety management, emergency response, and then all the flight standards and maintenance standards as part of industry best practices.
Okay.
We got to stage 3 as an organization, and once we achieved stage 3, this would have been in 2013. I decided I wanted to go on and become an auditor for ISVAO.
Yeah.
And had a lot of our colleagues calling, wondering, hey, help. How do you start an SMS? How do you implement the safety management system? What are you doing at John Deere? What resources can you direct us to? So as part of that, I decided I love teaching. I love educating. And it was really important for me to take that next step and go on and be an auditor. So I went to auditor school.
Okay. But let me hang on. If I can back up just a moment. For those who don't really know too much about ISVAO, it's an elective at the moment. It's an elective program that is recognized all over the world. And correct me if I'm wrong on these pieces. There is stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And then once you hit stage 3, you just continuously reapply or recheck out your operation to make sure you're still at that stage 3 level. Is that right?
Yes, that's
okay.
right. Yeah,
right,
you can stay at stage 3. Stage 3 is the best of the best. Continuous improvement, very, very strong safety culture, compliance with regulations and industry best practices is top notch. So flight departments can stay at stage 2, which is they've got an SMS implemented. They have a positive culture. They're adhering to the standards, but they may be lacking in some areas. So it's a great, one of the things I will say about any standard setting organization, I get to hear a lot from our industry that, it's so much work. It's so much work. Well, it is a lot of work. And the reason why it's a lot of work is because if you want a safe organization, you have to have team engagement. Team engagement, actually, for those organizations that have the highest team engagement, they're the safest organizations statistically.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that roadmap for your team to follow to all get involved and get engaged and be moving in the same direction, you're not engaged as a team. You're not moving towards that similar goal, and you're not putting in the hard work.
Yep.
So no matter what, team engagement is really important. It's a huge part of having a first-class safety department.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the things when I'm out auditing, I look at actually is team engagement.
Okay. Yep. Is everybody on board and participating? Very cool.
Yeah. And it's more than, as the safety manager, the SMS, is it actually, are the managers engaged? Are the frontline staff engaged? Are they all together, working together collectively? Or is there a lot of rift in the department that's tearing them apart, right? As people and within their culture. So it's a huge aspect of safety. And one of the things that I actually assess when I'm on site.
Very cool. All right, great. So sorry, I interrupted you. Now you were telling us you're learning to be an auditor.
So I went on to school to be an auditor. I was then approached by American Family Insurance out of Madison, Wisconsin. They were onboarding a Gulfstream G450 in international operations. They were stepping up from a large cabin airplane to super cabin airplane. And they didn't really have anyone at the time that had any international experience or Gulfstream experience. So, and that coincided quite well because our families were further north. So we ended up moving to Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I started working with American Family Insurance, onboarding their Gulfstream, taking a leadership role in the flight department, helping the pilots learn international procedures, getting our first international trip going, all of our international requirements and how we were going to do our flight planning, and the flight attendant side, getting that all set up. And
that is a really cool skill because I see that sometimes when we're asked to go in and maybe do some consulting for dispatch sections or maybe start a new dispatch department, that skill of creating and starting a department is completely different than just coming into a department that's already set up. And so I think, to set a side note, when people are hiring, you have to really look for those people who know how to set things up, who have experience in setting that up. What a great experience for American Family Insurance to have somebody come in and say, yeah, I'll handle this.
Yeah, absolutely. They did have an existing department, but that whole side of the international operation and that aircraft was lacking and missing. So there was a lot of changes and, just everything from how do we tow and tug this airplane into this hangar to how do we develop a flight attendant menu for the times that we're going to be leaving to go over to Europe, so that we feed our passengers because they just didn't know.
Sure.
So it was a wonderful opportunity for me to take what I learned and applied at John Deere and take it to the next level. And I had a wonderful mentor as my director of aviation. He was an incredible person. He's retired out of our industry now, but his mentoring and allowing me to help him help the flight department was an incredible journey at that time.
Oh, cool.
I was asked then to develop the drone program. So,
okay.
So we got that program off the ground and we ended up having a change in leadership in our flight department. And so I ended up actually leaving and going to go work for FedEx because that's what pilots do, right? Everyone says, oh, go work for FedEx. They're amazing. So
right. They're supposed to have the best job.
Yeah. Everyone talks about how good they're paid. But what they don't tell you, Lindsay, is the lifestyle is so hard. It is not for the faint of heart. I got the awesome sim slot time, which was 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. For training.
And work in general, all of your flying is in general the backside of the clock for FedEx, right?
It is. Starts at 9 o'clock, ends at about 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And I
was going to ask, yes, do you have small children at this point? Yes.
I did. I had a 3-year-old and I had an 8-year-old. Wow. So it was very taxing and I was gone for a very long time and I commuted. So we didn't live in Memphis. And there was a lot of things about the culture that it just didn't fit me. And that was okay. I knew that my business, I was trying to help get my business off the ground at the same time. I was actually thinking I could do both. I could juggle both.
Yeah.
But I had an incredible opportunity to partner my business with Airing Direct. And when the merger with Rockwell Collins and UTC Aerospace happened on Friday, I got my contract on Monday and I left FedEx on Monday to start my business full time.
Okay. Very cool. That's awesome. Okay. Can I go really quick back I'm just curious because I'm always interested in that drone section. Like I see a few people who started these departments up, but what did American Family Insurance use drones for?
So we were in the process of testing that out and looking at underwriting capabilities, especially the adjusters. That was a huge part of what was current at the time to allow the adjusters to be able to, instead of getting on the roofs, they could launch a drone and inspect the roof or inspect a house or a structure where there's been damage.
Got it. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great idea to be able to get that bird's eye view of that. Okay, cool. So sorry, I would backtrack. So you signed your contract and left FedEx on Monday.
Yep.
So super exciting. I bet that was it scary too?
It was, except when I was at American Family, I would sit in the morning with our director of maintenance and I would talk with him about all I wanted to do was run my own business.
Okay.
So I knew that I had higher purpose for our industry more than just piloting. And because of my age and knowing that, okay, where's the next 30 years of my life going to be? I knew I just didn't want it to be sitting in the left seat of a Gulfstream or sitting in the left seat of an Airbus, flying all over the world. And I knew that with my safety background, particularly with my accident, that I had a much higher calling in life. And also at the intersection of organizations trying to implement an SMS and really not understand what it actually means or what they're being asked to do. I would walk around John Deere's flight department, Lindsay, and think to myself, what do these standards mean? I don't even know what they mean. I have no clue. People are asking me, I don't even really know myself.
Okay.
So after I went on my own, in 2019, I had approached Ben Walsh at IBAC, which they run the ISBAO program.
Yep.
And I said, hey, Ben, I really think we need to get some standardization to these standards and what this means around the world so that we can help operators and auditors get an idea of what are we trying to do with this and what are we trying to achieve and how do we implement this into an operation? And he said, let's go. So I started work on development of the ISBAO standardization course and worked in cohort with IBAC to get down to what does the standard mean and how do we apply it in our operations.
Okay.
So that program,
because that could look really different, right? I mean, everybody's interpretation of a certain standard could look really different. So you were really trying to hone in on what it really should look like. And I would assume it also has to do with not only does it look similar, but it has to look similar for a small department, medium-sized department, and large department.
Yeah, it needs to fit, right? What is at the airlines is different than what a small 2-aircraft operator would have. Same concepts, but can be done differently.
Yeah.
And it needs to fit the operation.
Okay.
But we've needed that for so long. I needed that personally because I for years and years and years, even as an auditor, I'm like, I'm not really even exactly sure what this means. And I know other auditors had the same feeling because there wasn't any guide out there. There is now today. My team developed the ISBAO standardization course. It's a custom animation course with cartoon, voiceover, examples,
Cool.
Engaging, kind of fun. I didn't want it to be PowerPoint and slides. So we ended up learning how to become cartoon animators, voiceover experts, writing script.
Wow. And
it was a massive project to get off the ground. It just got published this spring with IBAC.
That's so great. And I can totally understand how much work you must have put into that. We have online courses as well, but we don't have all of the voiceover stuff. And just to do a PowerPoint with a voice on it is a lot of work. To do animation, you must have spent hours on it.
Yeah, cartoon animation at that. So all custom animation, script writing, voiceovers. It was crazy. But I think that we have an incredible product for our industry. What that allowed me to do was it gave me the opportunity to see what the world was expecting in SMS and become an expert in it. Not just kind of understand it as an auditor or what my opinion was, but truly get down to this is what it means and this is how to apply it. From there, because of my airline background, I was asked to participate in some 121 audits. And I had the opportunity to look and had the experience to see what the FAA was buying off on as part of the voluntary program for FAA Part 5 for their SMS.
Okay.
So I'll just back up a little bit. The FAA Part 5 SMS is a requirement today for 121 air carriers that they have to have a safety management system per Part 5 regulation.
Okay.
That Part 5 regulation is getting ready to extend to many, many operators and organizations in our industry coming up very shortly. So being able to see what the FAA was expecting and how they were expecting it and see examples of that and the differences between what the international standards and the world regulatory expectations were versus our FAA was an eye-opening experience for me. The FAA built their SMS off of a quality management system. And the world standard, even though is a little incorporated, is not totally incorporated into the FAA's SMS. There's actually more expectations to the FAA's SMS and differences in language and differences in system expectations and how it's actually run.
Wow.
So operators that have an existing SMS that's compliant with ICAO or goes through a world standard setting organization like Argus, Wyvern, Air Charter, ISBAO, BASC, there is differences to the FAA, and the FAA knows that it's a different standard, and they expect operators to adhere to that FAA Part 5 standard. You can't take your current existing SMS and push it across the desk to the FAA.
Interesting. So, okay, I'm going to ask a question. It's probably an opinion question, but why does it not match? And does that mean that the FAA is better, or is ISBAO, ICAO section better? Why are they different?
So it doesn't necessarily mean either is better. It's just what it's going to mean in the very short future here is if you're an operator in the United States and you have to have an SMS, you need to comply with the FAA Part 5 requirements. And if you fly outside the borders of the United States, even into Canada, you're expected to have an ICAO requirements SMS.
So you're going to have both. Okay.
You're going to have both because when you fly over to Europe right now for commercial operators, they look at operators' SMS and they're looking for specific requirements per the international standard. And if you're an organization that has only implemented FAA Part 5, you're missing things. But if you've only implemented ICAO, you're missing FAA stuff. So there's there's either one, no matter what. If you implement one, you're about, I would say approximately 70 to 75% of the way there.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But there's manual changes, additions, process changes, requirements. So it is, it's interesting. I have a partnership with Fireside Partners, and
yes, they're great.
Yeah, they're wonderful. And they offer emergency services to our industry. So when an aircraft accident happens, or when, and you would be familiar with them, and probably many of the individuals listening to this with being scheduling and dispatching. But yeah, we have gone and we have developed the FAA SMS workshop together because a part of SMS is an emergency response plan. And we wanted to help our industry understand where the differences are. How do I comply? Someone needs to teach us this because we've done ICAO NX19 for so long, or the international standard, and now we need to start complying with the FAA expectations. And how do we take what we existingly have and merge that together? So I have operators that have entered into the FAA voluntary program and started their journey in FAA Part 5. And we started that process in 2018. So I had clients in 2018 already starting that process and have had a wonderful opportunity to help those clients get into their conformance and see what the FAA is expecting. So very fortunate. My lens is, it's unique. It's very different, right?
Sure is. Can you tell us about, and maybe you're heading this way, but so who is this going to cover and when?
Sure. So this spring, the FAA put out a notice of proposed rulemaking for all 135 operating certificates.
Okay.
For air tour operators, for aircraft manufacturers and parts component operators. And they're possibly considering 145 repair stations as part of this rulemaking. We're expecting that sometime next year, we're going to have rulemaking by the FAA for, at a minimum, all those organizations and potentially 145 repair stations. We estimate it's about approximately, we think about 8,000 operators.
Oh my goodness, 8,000. So how long do you think, or how long will it take for the FAA to say, hey, here's your deadline?
Great question. They will publish the rule, but then they're going to give an effective period. So they're going to publish a rule and they're going to say, okay, this is going to be effective in 60 days. The timeline starts at that point.
Okay.
And then they're going to give a period of implementation, an implementation time frame for operators in individual categories typically. So we saw this with the airport rule, the 139 airport rule that came out in the springtime, where they required certain airports to have an SMS.
Okay.
And they gave a certain timeline to certain groups. If you're a large airport, you have X number of months to get an implementation plan in and get started. And then they gave another timeline for all the other events as part of getting the FAA into conformance.
Okay. All right. So it'll go through into discussion, and then they'll say, okay, you have a year or whatever it is to actually implement it. But so now 8,000 operators, though, that's a ton. And if you give them 1 year or even 2 years, I can't imagine how you're going to get even 8,000 of them. And am I also correct in saying then some of those 8,000 don't have the ICAO one either, because they're not flying international? So they're kind of starting from scratch?
Right. So if you look at even just 135 certificates, there's approximately, I think, about 3,500 of those in the United States. Yeah. Just that group alone is a substantial number of operators that need to get into conformance with FAA Part 5 requirements. And by the way, if you are a 135 or a 145 repair station and you're not in the voluntary program or implementing an SMS, you should be. You're late to the game already.
Okay.
So that is something, because there's so many operators out there. When we look across the board, at least in the safety committee for NBAA, because I lead the working group for NBAA SMS, we think there's approximately, of that 8,000, we think there's about 1,000-ish organizations, maybe a little bit more than 1,000, that have at least, at a minimum, implemented an SMS or have started and have some substantial distance where they've implemented and maybe they have stopped and they haven't quite gotten through it all the way. But still, that number is very small.
Yeah.
Because a lot of organizations that are Wyvern are also, they also are ISBAO or they're Argus, they're multiple. So it's really hard to tell exactly how many organizations have a valid SMS. And some operators today still think that if they have a frat, they have an SMS, which is not true. SMS encompasses so much more than a frat. It's hazard reporting. It's internal audits, both on your SMS and auditing your operation. It's change management. It's having a safety committee. It's having a manual for both SMS and ERP. There's so many parts. It's having a safety culture built.
Yeah.
It's having data analytics. We're actually moving into the next chapter of SMS, which is getting into predictive data and having the data tell us where our next incident and accident is occurring or potentially occurring at.
Okay. And how are you collecting that data? What is the FOQA program? Is that part of that, or is that completely separate?
No, FOQA is an input into the system to collect data.
Okay.
So individual organizations are left to collect their own data. So they collect it through hazard reports, internal audit findings, through safety reporting, through their employees, FOQA data. Some groups have a maintenance CAS system, which is supposed to be data analytics tracking for reliability and safety data. So some organizations have developed really, really good safety data that gets dumped into the SMS to look at predictive type measures.
Okay.
But we're just on the cusp of getting that started. And with the right system and the right things in place, your safety management system can become predictive in nature, where you're having multiple events or you're seeing multiple reoccurring things on FOQA. You focus on that, you reduce the risk through mitigation, and then you monitor it over time. That's SMS in a nutshell.
That is so cool. Hi, BAC listeners. Lindsay here. We decided to split this interview on SMS into 2 parts. Tune in next week for part 2, where we discuss more on SMS And we also delve into aviation entrepreneurship.